And welcome to Market of Influence, where I talk to influential people about influential things. Today, Jameson Hayes, University of Alabama. Let's do it. Hey, Jay,
Hey,
welcome
thanks for
to the
having me.
show.
Thanks, guy. I appreciate it.
How's it going?
Doing really well, really well. Busy as always.
All right, good man, good
As
man. I'm
always.
freezing here. Let's get this conversation started. Jay, you do a lot of research on brand relationships. I come more from the traditional PR side, where it's really about organizations and their stakeholders, but brands really care about relationships with their customers. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, honestly, I've spoken with PR folks over the years about this. I think that the difference between the two conceptually are overblown, right? PR is looking broader, more stakeholders than typically advertisers looking directly at consumers. But at the end of the day, it's all about brand satisfaction and brand trust. And we just kind of come at it a little different way. But if you think about things like controlled mutuality and reputation and all trust, all those things are built into the way advertisers look at relationships as well. Also, historically, I think advertisers have thought more about buy this ad and get to this consumer rather than long-term effects. But at the end of the day, advertising has also always been about relationships. We just haven't been able to measure it the way we can now, which is why I think you're seeing more consumer brand relationships discussed on the advertising side, catching up to the PR side.
Yeah, and this is why, the silos between ad, PR, marketing, with social media, hell, man, it's all engagement. But let's talk about brand relationships and why they matter. Like, why should brands really care about the relationships? What's the real life outcome?
From a brand point of view, it's a lot cheaper to keep a customer than to get a new customer. We know this from customer lifetime value research for a long time. Being able to build a relationship with the customer does a lot of things. First of all, it saves you money from the customer acquisition point of view, but it also saves you money from the marketing point of view when those customers start being advocates for your brand. And with social media, that's going to happen, and they're going to talk about your brand whether it's good or bad. So you want to have a strong relationship with them so it's good, and they also do some of the work for you. Also, you know, it's a it's very easy to have one small thing happen that can blow up on social media. But when you have a strong relationship with those customers, they will actually come to your defense and they will be more forgiving of you as well. So that long-term commitment is very important to protect the brand, but also for to get the brand where it wants to go. And it does mean that you have to co-create with consumers, which is a harder thing to do than we've done in the past. But when it's done well, it can be a very strong tool for the marketer.
Absolutely. So United Airline breaks my guitar, Chipotle gives me stomachache, Toyota has a recall. I'm going to be more forgiven when I have the brand relationship in place.
Absolutely. Bud Light does something you don't like, kills the market, but kills the market value. But a couple years, guess what? Bud Light's coming back.
All right. So, back in the day, it was very easy. The game was simple. Engagement, brand relationship building was all about paid media, right? You buy so many ads. You show people the Geico lizard, whatever it is, 1,000 times. You spend billions of dollars, P&G, all the big brands. But this really has changed, right? Today, brands are building relationship in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'll say this, people will say, "Hey, the focus on brand relationships has changed in advertising." Like, well, no, it's always been about brand relationships. I think a lot of the misconception there is that the focus was always on paid advertising simply because of the revenue model for the advertising industry. It was always we get a commission on whatever media we sell, therefore that's the focus of how we look at things. And now all of a sudden, because of influencers, because of more social media marketing, where those dollars aren't there for agencies, agencies are moving to different compensation models because now it's all about, hey, okay, how can we draw engagement in social media? That's not as expensive as buying a television ad, right? So now with the new model, we're now focusing on different KPIs that are more about the relationship than about the eyeballs.
But what about influencers completely breaking down the advertising agency? Hell, why would you go and pay a large agency millions of dollars to create a 30-second, 20-second, 15-second spot? I can hire a nano influencer who creates awesome stuff every single day to do it for me. And I just had a conversation with Matt Prince from Taco Bell. He's like, hey, we just hired this amazing content creator to create ads for us. So is the advertising, the production side of advertising, is that going away?
You know, I would love to say yes or no. I don't think that we know yet, because generative AI is just beginning to make its way in a big way in the industry. So much so that you're the average, first or second year associate can come in and use it. So the question becomes, yes, influencer marketing is a strong tool. But of course, you can't necessarily control the influencer, right? It's the same as celebrity endorsements. What happens if the influencer goes out and does something that reflects badly on the brand? What happens if they say something the brand doesn't want them to say? That's social media in a nutshell, right? So the question is, okay, can virtual influencers be the answer to that? The problem with virtual influencers is right now, customers don't really believe that they can show emotion because, well, they know they're a computer, right? Will that change the more we get used to interacting with virtual avatars? We don't know. That's kind of a wait and see on where the consumer adjusts to interacting with these sorts of AI-driven beings. So I think it's hard to know. I think we have to stay nimble. We have to say, okay, here's what works, here's what doesn't. Here's why you still want the advertising agency or the in-house marketer involved to make sure that the strategy for the brand isn't completely taken over by the consumer. The consumer has to be a big part of it, but how can we steer that in a way that strategically moves the brand where we need it to go to be successful long term?
Yeah, well, let's move away from virtual influencers and listen back to the consumer. I'm looking at your background. You are sitting in your public opinion lab at the University of Alabama, where you're using tools like Sprinkler and Brandwatch, right? And a bunch of other tools, Talkwalker, to listen to what people are saying, what consumers are saying. So, can you talk about how social media analytics are really evolving how people in the industry are thinking about brand relationships?
Well, if we think again back to what we were saying earlier, that before the revenue model was buy ads, get eyeballs, pay the agency. Well, that was because that was all the data we have. We didn't have enough data. We're working with things like Nielsen and ComScore and kind of assuming that their numbers were the number of people we were reaching and that it was actually having an effect. We couldn't actually see the effect. Now we have the opposite problem. We have too much data. Social media creates trillions and trillions of bytes of data every hour, and we have to figure out how to make all that make sense. All that data is unstructured. If you think about something as simple as the difference between the emojis on Facebook versus the like button and the heart emoji on Twitter, well, that data is fundamentally different, and we have to figure out, okay, how can we bring that together in a model that we can look at it the same way and spit out an output that can actually be used for actionable insights. And that's what social media analytics does, right? It develops AI models that says, okay, we're trying to understand this industry or this consumer. We're going to use Reddit, Facebook, X. I said Twitter, showing my age there a bit. X, whatever the social media platform is, ingest all that into the model and spit on the other side something that can be read in an agency reliably. And that's the hard part, reliably. But the nice part about that, once we have all that social data in, we can understand, we have metrics that can speak to brand sentiment, trust, satisfaction with the product, satisfaction with the way we're communicating with them, and make adjustments. And that's how you manage a brand relationship. So now we have much more data at our disposal. It's just a matter of making sure people know how to use that data in a way that can drive insights that are reliable for the brand.
I love it. And let's talk a little bit more about computational methods and how they're changing the advertising game all around.
Yeah. So I told students 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when we launched the lab here at Alabama, one of the reasons we're launching this lab is because there are a lot of advertising jobs that are being taken by computer scientists because they understand the data and we don't, right? The problem with that is those computer scientists don't understand communication. They don't understand the advertising part. How do we strategically communicate to audiences and get them to do what we would like them to do? So we're trying to now, communications discipline is now working hard to catch up on that. And we're now trying to build people that are communication data scientists that can understand how to not only use these things like Sprinkler and Brand Watch, but also how to pull that data out and do interesting things to understand networks and who's the most influential people in the network we need to be reaching out to in order to get to these next level of consumers. And so more and more, that is what's being used to drive decisions. It's absolutely, obviously, what's being used to drive programmatic advertising. So now, whether you don't necessarily have to put students out, they can go in and write the algorithm to place the ad. There's companies for that. What we do need to do is we need people to be able to go into an agency and understand what questions to ask of the data, right? And that's something that AI can't do, right? That's why we should be focusing on more than ever critical thinking and how to think strategically about advertising and how those people are going to work with the algorithm to get the best impact for the brand.
Yeah, awesome. And really, I always tell students there are four major questions that we can ask of the data. That is, what are people talking about? How are they talking about? Right? Where are they talking about? Who is talking about? Right? Who's influencing the conversation? And what's the outcome? Right? Let's talk about influencers and the role that we really attribute to them in kind of building a bridge between the brand and online communities. Right? You and I have done a lot of research, some research together, comparing, the mega influencers to the small influencers and nano and micro influencers. What's some thoughts do you have right now about where this influencer game is going?
First, we still have a lot to learn about influencers, right? People tend to think of influencers in terms of just, okay, the size of the market, because this again goes back to the old eyeballs, right? If I hire a nano influencer, I'm paying for this many eyeballs. If I hire a mega influencer, I'm paying for this many eyeballs.
So they're
But
thinking about reach. They're thinking reach only.
exactly, they're not thinking about the relationship, right? The difference between a mega influencer and a celebrity who may have the same amount of followers is how they got there, right? Influencers started from zero and they interacted with their followers and built them up organically, whereas celebrities brought them over from wherever their fame comes from offline. What that means is where celebrities are just known because they're famous, influencers have built trust and emotional attachment with their followers over a long period of time because they started off as just a peer and kind of became a commercial being. So they're able to kind of straddle that line between peer that we can trust and commercial, the commercial aspect of being an influencer a lot longer than a celebrity can. Right now, we found the work that we've done is kind of suggested that there is that spot where you become too commercial, and all of a sudden you aren't as successful as an influencer. So we have to figure out what that sweet spot is. But also, I think we have to think about the life cycle of the influencer, right?
Let's talk about that. You and I have exchanged some thoughts about this. What is the life cycle of the influencer? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, so if you start off on day one and you start building a following, you begin as a nano influencer, you get enough followers that you're impactful, but you're still seen mostly as a peer. So at that point, when you reach out to peers, you're not looking for their any emotional attachment. You're looking for a peer that can say, "Hey, I tried this brand. That person's like me. If I try it, I'm gonna like it," right? So you're really looking for more informational, and those smaller level influencers can be very good at giving you that information in an honest way because you don't see it as commercial. As you grow, you kind of have just build a relationship with that influencer much the same way you do with a brand. So you have a little more emotional attachment, and they can kind of branch out and start saying, and you start using kind of emotional appeals for the brand. But then when you get to a certain point, we all know that you're now getting paid to hot products, right? You're a sponsored influencer. So then the commercial aspect starts to work in. What we found, is that you can still maintain that personal aspect and that peer view for so long, and then when you reach a certain point, you're now a commercial being. So if you're thinking about that, particularly when you're also thinking about can we grow virtual influencers alongside regular influencers, you have to think about, okay, when is that influencer going to get so big that we need to be looking at other influencers that can work through those cycles again, because at some point the influencer is going to lose its ability to really impact the audience in the same way, and we might as well be paying a celebrity at that point, right? So I think those are things we really have to think through, and then figure out, okay, well, and I think, by the way, that's one of the big concerns with virtual influencers. Besides them being a computer, from what I've gathered with the data that I have access to, they tend to manufacture and buy those followers. So they don't go through the process of building the trust with their followers. They kind of try to take a celebrity route to an influencer life cycle, and it just doesn't work.
Because the mindset over there is still, let's get reach, let's get as many eyeballs,
Exactly.
if I have a zillion followers. But really the new algo, right? You see this on TikTok, but it's probably going to be on other platforms as well, is that it's no longer who's got the most followers. It's who's got the best content, right? Who's got the most relatable content, the most relevant content. Absolutely. All right. So Jay, let's finish up strong and think about the future. And not the far future. We're not smart enough. It's above our pay grade. But next 3 to 5 years, as people who are interested in the field of influencers and advertising marketing in general, think about how data and AI is going to transform the game. What are some thoughts you have?
For me, I think generative AI and understanding how that fits into your process is the most important thing, right? And that's because it's really taking off right now in a way that's become more accessible for everyone to use, and the learning curve is not as high because you don't really need coding ability anymore, right? Because of that. So my question would be, if I was a marketer, what does the advertising process look like? How does it impact my strategy? How is it going to impact my creative? How does it impact my measurement on the back end? And how is that going to impact my income model with the clients I'm working with, right? How do I need to be paid? With that, what skill sets need to be changed? As I said before, if you think about it, many people say AI is going to take all the creative jobs. Well, in my view, I don't look at it that way, and here's why. If you work that to the farthest extent, even if you say AI is going to personalize advertising to every individual, it's all based on a data algorithm. So eventually it will all be non-new content to every customer. It won't be creative, which is what sells, right? So how is your personnel going to work with AI in a way that moves you forward without you thinking we're going to kill everyone in the agency and just use AI to do our jobs? Uh, and then finally, I think we need to think about how to use this ethically, right? Well, what do we need to tell the consumer? If we're thinking about influencers using generated AI, how do we put guidelines on that from a brand perspective to make sure the influencer is, one, acting ethically and using data that is appropriate, but also if the influencer is using AI, why aren't we just using AI? So I think we have to put some guidelines on that, and with that, we have to develop something that you've been working on, influencer relations. How does the marketer work with the influencer? What does that relationship look like? How is that negotiated? How does the consumer work into that? I think that relationship we need to understand. So in the next 5 years, I would say, okay, across all those different things, how does AI change the way I need to organize my agency and work on the client work?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, let's revisit in 3 years here and look back and laugh at ourselves for completely missing the point because it's going to look totally different. It's going to be awesome. Jay, thanks so much for coming in today. Appreciate your wisdom, your thoughts. As always, have a great day.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.